Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I am excited to be here. I am really looking forward to sharing something. This is a call to action for all of you in Texas. So much of what we talk about has to do with the narcissist, the family court system, and, as a community, all of us coming together and providing support to each other. But there are going to be times that we need to focus on something bigger and even more scary. Hello, Gigi. Good morning. Um, in Texas right now, there is a 50-50 parenting bill. It's HB 803 Equal Parenting Bill. And that is terrifying. When these things come into play, a lot of times they slide right in without anyone knowing about it. And it can be absolutely devastating for all of our cases. And when it's picked up in Texas, it's going to be picked up somewhere else. It just keeps going. It's a horrible domino effect. And so one of the members from our Texas group on the OMB state chapters, she commented when I brought this to the group's attention, and I told them, you need to start shouting from the rooftops. You need to be involved in calling your representatives, having all of your family members call your representatives, send emails, send letters. We have to shoot this down. And as much as I am very pro-dad, my dad raised me, I am pro-healthy parent, this is backed by fathers' rights groups with an agenda. And I think anytime we create a division and make this about mom's rights or dad's rights, that is a huge part of the issue in the family court system. So I want to share what one of our OMB members chimed in with for the group. And that is, hi, I had not seen this post until just a minute ago, but I want to encourage each of you and your family members and friends to start contacting your state senators and representatives and ask them to oppose this dangerous bill. As an advocate, I have spent time at the Capitol this week, and I have seen early and aggressive activity from the Equal Parenting Fathers' Rights Group behind this bill. They are already in the legislative offices sharing their stories and distributing one-pagers, and I would expect this to continue. Typically, this would not be as concerning, but I can also tell you that the legislative offices are unusually quiet right now, and the staff members are listening to those few groups who are reaching out and showing up. This won't be the only time it is needed, but I do encourage you to take time right now to call your state elected officials and notify them that this is a no good, very bad bill. Calls from constituents are easy, the more the better. They are logged by staff and they can be effective in impacting votes and support for legislation. If you are, I don't know. I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't know how it works if you're outside of Texas. Hopefully somebody who has a deeper understanding of this can comment and share that with us, because like Gigi's asking, how can we, people outside of Texas assist? And I want to know the same thing. How do we, start pounding the pavement if you are close enough to show up? But for those of us who aren't, for those of us outside of Texas, how do we help? Because we cannot. Texas is already one of the most broken states. This will be devastating for protective parents in Texas, especially those of you going up against narcissists, sociopaths, other high conflict individuals. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of getting involved and stopping this. We at One Mom's Battle have, successfully spearheaded things like this in the past. This did not hit my radar until this week, or I would have been yelling about it a long time ago. And that is, it's okay. Somebody just asked, what is the bill again? It's HB House Bill 803. Let me see. Let me just verify that. HB 803 Equal Parenting Bill. So many times I see these, nobody even knows, nobody's even paying attention, and these things slide through and they're approved. And, for those of us who are out here fighting and pro-child and pro-healthy parent, yeah, it just makes me want to cry because I can only imagine how much worse Texas is going to get. And I could completely set up shop there and work full time just based on my clientele in Texas. So please, 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 if you have, HB, thank you, Gigi. Get involved, find out if somebody knows the ins and outs of how we outside of Texas can help. I will continue to spearhead this as much as I am capable, using my platform at One Mom's Battle. So anyway, good morning, Peyton. Peyton says, I'm exhausted fighting this battle. I've only been in it, separated for 5 years. 5 years is a long time. And give yourself that grace that this is not an easy battle. And even, if you would have interviewed me at 6 months into my battle, I was feeling beaten down. Peyton says, I have a lot of family in Texas. Get them on the phone, get them emailing their offices, their representatives. So that is my call to action for this morning. Before we, Gigi says, I'd imagine most of those states' elected officials are male and susceptible to sympathizing with them. Yep. Misogynistics themselves. I feel like that's a huge part of the Texas family court system, is a lot of the good old boys networks, a lot of misogynistic men. I love you guys, men in general. There are, and I don't ever want to be seen as a male basher. And I recently had this conversation with my husband, and I said, what people need is the good guys standing up and saying enough. That the good men of our world need to be voices with us and saying, this is a huge pervasive problem and it's not okay. So, okay, let's, has a similar bill been proposed in other states? And if they were stopped, how? Yes, absolutely. These bills are always, Ginger asked that question, these bills are constantly sliding in. And some of them, I know, I can't think of the states. I know we've done major calls to action with OMB members, getting people to be really loud voices, and other great organizations, the Center for Judicial Excellence, other organizations who are also against these, shared parenting bills. It's basically what you're saying is that a parent's rights, just because they have the ability to procreate, trump a child's rights. And that is, I could talk about this all day. It is just so wrong and so triggering. But I want to jump into the questions. So let's do that. The first question is how to deal with an attorney who is not on board with leverage, but it's too late to change attorneys. That's I know it's a question that probably hits home for a lot of people. And I guess what would factor in for me, again, I'm not qualified to give legal advice. We are just a community of survivors who come together to support each other. But, the questions that I would personally ask myself is, am I in tune with the Do I have my finger on the pulse of my local court system? Is my attorney just being lazy and not wanting to be strategic and think outside of the box and consider me a team player? You're paying them. They work for you. But I would want to make sure that I'm managing my expectations appropriately and that I am in tune with the realities of the system. If I'm asking my attorney to go in and, ask for things that he knows or she knows are going to get shot down, they may have insight that I don't have. And so that's where I feel like open communication with an attorney is so critical. For me, because I represented myself, the most anxiety I had in my case was near the end when I hired an attorney. And if you're listening, I love you, John. And you are a fantastic attorney, and I would recommend you to people day in and day out. But I know that I am the best voice and advocate for my kids. And so turning the reins over to someone else after so long, completely made me derailed. I was so filled with anxiety. For me, I would want to talk to my attorney and let them know, I know you have clients who just let you take the reins and go and don't ask questions. I am not that person. These are my babies. This is my life. I want to be considered a team player. I want to understand the strategy. I value communication, and I need to feel heard and respected in this process. And here's the thing, if you haven't had that communication with your attorney, it may be something to consider, because they have to have emotional boundaries and shut off the empathy switch and see these as case numbers so they can continue doing this work. I have a tremendous amount of compassion for the good family law attorneys because this is brutal work and you are seeing the worst side of humanity. So I see it through that lens as well. For me, if I were feeling the way you are feeling right now, I would want to go consult with 3 other attorneys in my area or outside of my area to bounce my ideas off of them, to, play out the situation and my concerns and get their opinions, because, that is, leverage. It's a word that so many people grasp onto. My leverage was, I knew big picture he wasn't capable of doing 50-50. I knew it was for control, to pay less child support, image. His mom needed those pictures on Instagram to show everyone that she was a great grandma. And so, his was, a lot of it was pleasing mommy. The court dates that he filed in my case coincided with her returning home to the US for summers and holidays. That my battle I maintain to this day was against my ex-mother-in-law and not my ex-husband. He would have fizzled out a long time before he did. But they have just this weird relationship with their mom where she's probably the most dysfunctional out of the entire family, even though it's a family of, in my opinion, sociopaths, narcissists, God knows what else. She is the one who is aware of their dysfunction and works overtime to clean it up. So, that my leverage with my ex-husband was he wasn't capable of 50-50 and financials. So, determining what your leverage is. And again, we have to be in an ultra marathon mindset. I was on a podcast last night with Matt Pfeiffer out of Texas, and we were talking about this, and he was saying, it's, I just lost my train of thought. It's about, I totally just lost what Matt was saying. I was so worried about getting his name right and the podcast. Anyway, you have to be in tune with your ex and what that is, but then the reality of, is it going to matter to the court system? Because what matters to us doesn't matter to them. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was saying to Matt, it's an ultra marathon, but the narcissist trains for a 5K or a 10K. And he's like, half the time the narcissist is sprinting. They're training for a sprint. And that is so true. So that has to be our mentality in this battle. There's so much strategy that weaves into our situations, and it's hard when you are in that emotional fight or flight. Nature intended for me to protect my children. I'm doing what I'm supposed to, and I'm being shot down time and time again. That in itself wears on you. So Jenny asked, triumph over trauma. Yes. Or triumph, toxic to triumph, or yes. Matt is one of my fellow narc educators on TikTok. And we did a podcast yesterday, which I think he said it's a few weeks out before it will go live. And I see him on TikTok. I don't know a lot about him, but I know he has a huge following and helps so many people. And I got so nervous going on his podcast. And then by the time it ended, I'm like, time just flew so fast. I could have literally sat there and talked to that guy for 8 hours straight. It was just, he is fantastic. Jenny just asked, we have to correct him on parental alienation. I did. If Matt is watching, I hope he's okay with me sharing this. Right before we went live, he said, are there any topics that are off limits that you don't want to talk about? And I said, well, one that's very triggering for me that we have different views on is alienation. So, we can discuss that and do a powwow on that down the road. But right now, I'm not in the right mindset to talk about that because it is such a triggering topic. And so I started to explain to him my position on it, that absolutely narcissists do work overtime to turn children against the healthy parent. That is valid. I'm not trying to diminish that. It is painful. I have clients who go through that. My issue is with the word alienation. Don't use it. It is propelling. Every single time that word is used, it is validating and propelling forward the most disturbing people who will take a big check and say anything about you that your ex wants them to say. I just talked to a mom yesterday who, one of these evaluators who has drank the alienation Kool-Aid, all they're looking for is a couple of little check boxes to say, haha, she's alienating. This lady is suggesting that we separate siblings, that two of them go no contact with their protective mom for 90 days. I mean, these are little children. And, I think it's going to turn out okay. I think enough holes have been poked in this evaluation that it's not going to happen. But this woman here in California is part of the problem. They are taking such, it's about money for them. They get financial kickbacks for sending these kids to camps. If anybody who is using that word wants to hear some of the audio or see some of the video of children being ripped out of their protective parents' arms or the courthouse and sent into an awaiting van headed for a camp where they won't see their protective parent for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I know some of these moms. So Matt and I had a great conversation offline about alienation and not using that word. And he was very receptive to hearing what I had to say. And, we'll see what that, I got off the phone or off the podcast and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm proud of myself. I didn't, it is a triggering topic. So I handled it pretty well. I was proud of myself. All right. Next question. X is making unilateral decisions, even going so far as to put my child on anxiety medication without my permission. I would be screaming at, knocking down my attorney's door. And, if I were to go to, first of all, let me get my thoughts. What was the podcast people are asking? It is, somebody had posted it up above in the comments. It is Matt Pfeiffer coaching out of Texas, and it's it's toxic to triumph, or somebody's going to comment for me and share. Jenny, chime in. If my ex were making decisions like that, first of all, I personally would be strategic in yellow rocking. For those of you who don't know what yellow rock is, it is my method of communicating with the narcissist, which gray rock can really hurt your case in court from my triumph over trauma. Thank you. Gray rock can really hurt us in court. I am not a fan of gray rock. And yellow rock, I would be strategic in my communication. Hey, I just wanted to reach out. I'm a little confused. I didn't know that there was a doctor's appointment. We didn't agree to anxiety medications. Can you help me to understand what unfolded? So I'm in the loop because our court order states that we are both supposed to make these decisions together. So I'm not writing that for him because obviously he's not a healthy human. I'm writing that for the court. I am building my case to show that I am the healthy co-parent. He is not. And then I would escalate it to my attorneys very quickly. And that for me would have been, because I represented myself, I would have filed an ex parte emergency motion with the court to address that issue. Because, so many of these things, if the court doesn't know what's going on, they have no idea, and that's where I feel frustrated for my clients a lot of times, where attorneys are constantly shutting them down, saying, well, that's not enough evidence right now, or we don't have enough to put it in front of the court. And then by the time you do get enough evidence, then they look at your case and they go, oh, well, those things are in the past. And you're like, but I brought them up to you when they were happening. And if it's not put in front of the court has no idea. They don't have the bandwidth to care about what's going on behind the scenes. So for me, I was a little bit different than most. I was the one filing the orders because I didn't have an attorney saying, no, we're not doing that. I put things in front of the court. And I do feel like that's one of the aspects that, and there are variables that go into that. There would be some judges who would have been so frustrated by me, and my judge was. He was absolutely frustrated. I remember he'd scan the audience in the morning and go, Swithin, what are you here for? And like, oh, he knows my name. For me, if the court didn't know what was happening, they can't do anything about it. And so I risked frustrating him over and over until he got it. And that was a big turning point. Bill Eddy, Biff, brief, informative, friendly, yet firm. Yeah, Bill Eddy, he went to the dark side. He does alienation stuff, but his actual teachings on communication are fantastic. And he recently came out with a Biff book for specific to child custody stuff. I haven't read it yet, but I do think he has fantastic advice for dealing with high conflict individuals. We just differ greatly on the alienation stuff. So I'll just keep plugging away over here on my alienation soapbox. Yeah, dry, no emotion, but with kindness. Absolutely. It's the type of email you would send to your boss or to a colleague, where there were days that I truly had concerns about my ex-husband's mental health, putting my kids in the car, that I actually worried about their safety. Even on those days when I sent him an email, I would say, I hope you guys have a great weekend. That wasn't being manipulative. I was writing it for the court, but that is authentically who I am. Any other person in the world, I would tell them, I hope you have a great weekend. So it's staying authentic and true to who you are and presenting well for the court, and building your case strategically. So, abuse, bringing it up, but there is no proof. How or when do you bring up abuse when you don't have proof? That's a really hard question. Abuse, even people who have pictures. I have seen cases over and over again, even where they have proof, depending on the judge, depending on the court system that they're in, it doesn't even seem to matter. Or the other party can muddy the water and say, oh, she fell because she was drunk. Are you kidding me? I can't believe she's doing this. And so abuse without proof, and I guess it would matter about what type of abuse are we talking about? One of the biggest hurdles that I see, even with the new coercive control bills, is proving it. Especially when we're talking about emotional and psychological abuse. I didn't even try in my case. I never accused him of abuse. And now, that I have the awareness and the education on what domestic violence is, he did block my pathways, block me in rooms, grab my arm to control me or to silence me or to squeeze my arm. There was, those aspects of physical abuse. I had always said, no, he never physically abused me. And it was only in talking to an attorney who's very skilled in domestic violence, he goes, did he ever block your pathway? Did he ever grab your arm? Yeah, lots of times. That's abuse. Proving it, though, is another. I never attempted to, because even back then I knew the reality of the system. So I know some people, journaling has been incredibly helpful. If you have kept a journal of the abuse and how you were feeling in those moments and those types of things, I would encourage you to connect with somebody, if you are the one asking this question, who can really, somebody who's good with documentation, or an attorney who's skilled in domestic violence, who can help you to paint that picture, or tell you, I just don't think it's enough. It's hard to go back. And Ardley says, please up the like for everyone, the algorithm. I don't know what that means, but good morning. Thank you. Yes. What about reproductive coercion, meaning he refused to wear protection so you can get pregnant on purpose? I think that it falls into, unfortunately, the family court system has a huge victim blaming mentality, and it's their way, I think, to leave and not have to own any of the brokenness. And that is very much along the lines of, we chose these partners and it's not their job to fix. And unfortunately, with something like that, and that's very prevalent. I have clients who went on vacation, went on their honeymoon, know they packed their birth control pills and got to the Caribbean. They no longer have their birth control pills. They are now pregnant. I think that that's actually more common than we hear about. It's not something, and I get why people wouldn't want to publicly talk about it, because you don't want your child to come across a comment you made, in reference to your pregnancy with them. I get it. And so it's another area where we're silenced. Trying to prove that to the court, I don't know how you would do that. I try to think of, if I were in your shoes, how would I convey that to the court? It's just like I've shared many times where my judge actually looked at me and said, "You chose this person for a partner. You chose to have children with him. It's not my job to fix your problems." And I said that to Matt yesterday on the podcast, is, boy, was that a punch in the gut. Boy, did that hurt. But you know what? From a place of strategy, I'm so grateful that my judge actually verbalized what he and every other judge behind the bench is thinking, because it allowed me to shift my strategy and stop looking to the court to validate me, to save me, or whatever it was. I had to take a different approach on that. And so I was grateful, as weird as that sounds, I was grateful to know that that was the way the judge's mind was thinking about my situation. So great questions, great topics. Painful ones though. Last question. Best advice for someone just beginning the battle. If I could go back to 2009 when my battle started, I had no idea about communicating with a narcissist. I would get his attacks and I would sit down and I would answer back in 4 paragraphs just about how I wasn't a bad person, how I was not a bad mom, I was a good mom, and I would have not engaged in 90% of the battles that I was invited to. And I would have been much more selective about what I put in front of the court. It was over a year into my battle that I started sitting in the courtroom and trying to learn the process and the reality of the system. I would have done that much earlier. So congratulations if you are involved in these communications, these networks, these support groups, because back then I didn't have access to that. There was nothing back then. And so, really understanding the realities of the system, practicing radical acceptance, managing my expectations about the system appropriately. If you are unfamiliar with radical acceptance, look up Dr. Ramani's YouTube channel and search for her videos on radical acceptance. It is such a critical component of this. One of the things that I know that I did very well from day one, at the advice of my friend who was a police officer, was document everything. Every single thing, whether you think it's significant or not. It was truly a full-time job for me. And I hardly anything that I documented ever made its way into the courtroom. But I will say there were so many junctures where it was helpful, whether, I went through 2 child custody evaluations, minors counsel being appointed, so many court dates, I could not even count them. And there were times in each of those situations where my documentation was very helpful in showcasing my concerns. And so document. And if you don't know how to track things, how to set up your system, I do a full course where I share my own documentation system with others. Exactly the program or the system that I used. So, that is on the One Mom's Battle website. Just click on online courses. We have one for mediation, documentation, strategic communication, If you are new to this battle, I actually have one called, the 101 of Divorcing a Narcissist, which is designed for people very new to the battle. And then the one that I personally feel is the most important is Safeguarding Your Case from Claims of Alienation, because that is the go-to accusation for abusers. And now we're seeing it morph into different terms. She's too enmeshed. She's gatekeeping. Now we see Stockholm syndrome. They're getting really creative. They're repackaging these things. There's an actual diagnosis for Stockholm syndrome. So now they're saying the kids are suffering from Stockholm syndrome because they don't want to go with their abuser. Who would want to go with their abuser? So, and Munchausen. You take your child to the doctor a couple of times, and now you're a helicopter mom who suffers from Munchausen by proxy. It's just, that would be one of the, if I could go back, because alienation was what I was accused of the whole time, that webinar is a really good one for anyone new to the battle. Gigi shared the serenity prayer. Radical acceptance. Accept the things you cannot change and change the things you can. Yes. And for me, it's very much, okay, here's the circumstance. I have no control over that. Even if you need to sit down and write out what's in your control and what isn't, and get crystal clear on that, and then go, okay, I may have to shift my thinking, or I may have to create a new pathway. What can I do now? I radically accept this is a broken system. I'm stuck in it. Radical acceptance. Here we are. Now what? And so that is a really good mentality to develop. So, all right, everybody, happy Friday. For those of you who joined in late, go back and listen to the very first part of this, because Texas has a equal 50-50 parenting bill sponsored by fathers' rights groups that we need to come together and knock down. You need to be on the phone with your representatives. It's HB House Bill 803. I think that's what we said. Get involved, yell from the rooftops, yell louder than they are. We need to make sure this does not go through. It's very, very important. So thank you, everybody. Take care, and I will see you next Friday.